All freedom of speech protects is the heinous, terrible kind of speech that people don't want to hear, because you don't need protection for speech that people want to hear.
Hey, good morning. Can you tell us who you are and what you do?
My name is Glenn Blackett. I'm a lawyer with the Justice Center, and I fight for constitutional freedoms for Canadians. That's about it.
Can you tell us a little about what happened to the Free Speech Club at the University of British Columbia in 2019?
Yes, so in about 2018, the Free Speech Club was hosting a number of events at UBC's campus. Those events were becoming increasingly protested by left-wing groups, a group calling itself Students Against Bigotry, and another group that we've heard of called Antifa. The events still carried on and everything was fine. There were big attempts to disrupt those events. And then they tried to bring in Andy Ngo to talk to UBC students about Antifa violence. And when the university heard about this, basically within about 2 weeks they had decided to cancel it, purportedly on the basis of some safety concerns. So the Campus Free Speech Club at the University of British Columbia has become basically defunct. It can't host exciting events on campus anymore because those events will be canceled by an administration if they're, I would say, if they're not liked. So that's what happened there.
So that's happening in British Columbia, but there's another similar case. Can you tell us what happened to Dr. Frances Widdowson at the University of Lethbridge in 2023?
Yeah, so Dr. Widdowson, first of all, she is a person who has spent her life thinking about issues of Indigenous socioeconomic disparity. So why are Indigenous Canadians experiencing the kind of socioeconomic disparity with other Canadians? Because of her I would say, views on these matters that she comes to, I think, through an honest search for knowledge. She has become the victim of a cancel culture. And in particular, she was, the highlight was she was fired as a tenured professor from Mount Royal University. So she has both an expertise in Indigenous Indigenous issues, but also a new expertise in cancel culture because she's both the victim of it and has done a bunch of studying about it and now writing about it. So she was invited by Paul Viminitz, a former tenured professor who has also been fired by the University of Lethbridge, to come onto campus to talk about wokeness and how wokeness is a threat to campus free speech. There was a wave of basically a woke cancellation of that event, and so the event was canceled by the president and couldn't proceed.
So we've got the Free Speech Club in British Columbia. We have Dr. Frances Widdowson at the University of Lethbridge. What do the two cases have in common?
Well, obviously, they're two cases that deal with attempts by people on university campuses to have, an actual dissenting opinion voiced on campus. And the culture is such that dissenting opinions on campus are increasingly prohibited. So, the commonality is that you have universities that I would say are simply not performing their basic function, which is to permit an open inquiry into scientific and democratic issues.
So every year, more than 70,000 students attend UBC. Nearly 2 million students attend a post-secondary institution every year in Canada. Do they have freedom of expression on campus?
I would say no. And they don't, because you have to ask yourself, well, what does freedom of speech protect? There's an idea that, well, freedom of speech protects, both speech we like and speech that we don't like, terrible speech, heinous speech. But I would say no, all freedom of speech protects is the heinous, terrible kind of speech that people don't want to hear, because you don't need protection for speech that people want to hear. So if the one thing you're not allowed to say on campus is something that people don't like, then you really have no effective free speech on campus. And across the different disciplines at university and across subject matter, there's an increasing and expanding range of perspectives that you're simply not allowed to voice on campus.
So the BC Supreme Court recently ruled that the Canadian Charter of Rights and Freedoms does not apply to students in BC. In other words, UBC wasn't obligated to observe the freedom of expression of the Free Speech Club. Do you think that was the wrong call?
I do, we do. That's why we've appealed it to the BC Court of Appeal. In the lower court's defense, the BC Court of Appeal in 2016 had come to much the same conclusion, so I think the lower court felt somewhat bound by that precedent. But we think ultimately the judge should have looked at the facts that were alleged in the statement of claim, and had the judge given a fair shake on those facts, then he should have come to a different conclusion. So we are appealing that.
So that's what's next for the Free Speech Club. What's next for Dr. Francis Widdowson?
So basically in February of 2025, we argue the motion. So that's basically the next step there. So we're in court, we're trying to convince the court that both the charter protects Francis Widdowson. The case law in Alberta, although more favorable in other jurisdictions, doesn't say necessarily that it protects Francis Widdowson. So we're looking to see the court confirm that it protects her, as well as her co-applicant, a student, Jonah Pickle. And secondarily, I think it's quite obvious that the cancellation of the event breached the Charter, Section 2B, that protects freedom of expression and thought, including the freedom of students and staff and public members to listen to other people. And I don't think it's going to be something that should be saved under Section 1, meaning it's not something that I think that the university will be able to convince a court was a justifiable infringement of charter rights.
So we're talking about cancel culture in BC and Alberta. Why would somebody in Ontario or Quebec care about these cases? What's at stake for Canadians everywhere?
Well, I would say that in a democracy and in a scientific society, there are certain nodes of activity that are really important. And one node of activity that's really important both in science and for democratic debate is a university campus. And so if that node is an area where, okay, well, we can't have proper and full democratic debate, we can't talk about historical facts, we can't talk about reasons for socioeconomic disparities between Indigenous and other Canadians. If we can't talk about those things, then we can't discover the truth. And likewise, if we can't have those conversations, then we can't really have an informed discussion about what policies should be. The effect for a person in Ontario is that they also have universities where free speech is not protected under the Charter, and freedom of conscience, and freedom of religion, and freedom from racial discrimination, and every other freedom in the Charter. And so it interests them, but also as Canadians generally, they should be interested in making sure that their ability to express themselves democratically is protected.